You are not alone inside your own mind. There's an uncomfortable truth, one that modern psychology often avoids for being too terrifying. Parts of you are alive, autonomous, and have their own wills. I am not speaking in metaphors. I am talking about psychic ghosts, fragments of your own consciousness that have broken off and now act as independent entities, hijacking your emotions, sabotaging your decisions, and forcing you to relive the same pains over and over again. Carl Jung called them complexes. Think about the last time you had an explosive, disproportionate reaction, that moment when a blind fury or a paralyzing panic took over. And later, looking back, you barely recognized yourself. Who was in command at that moment? It wasn't you. It was an activated complex, an old wound that seized control of your body and your voice. These hidden forces are the true architects of your destiny, operating in the shadows, ensuring you never escape the patterns that imprison you. They are the reason you always fall in love with the same type of person who destroys you. Why success always seems to slip through your fingers. Why happiness feels like a mirage. In this video, we won't just talk about them. We will shine a light into the dungeons of your psyche and face them, one by one. I will give you the map to navigate your own abyss and the key to transform these prisons into sources of power. If you are ready to stop being a puppet and reclaim the throne of your own mind, then make a pact now. Subscribing to this channel is your commitment to this journey. Leaving your like is the seal that confirms your courage to look into the darkness. And comment the word awakening to signal to other travelers that you are among those who are no longer content to live on autopilot. The journey begins now. Imagine that every emotionally charged experience you've ever had, especially those from childhood, filled with love, fear, shame, or abandonment, doesn't simply disappear. Instead of dissipating, the energy of that experience condenses, like a drop of water forming on a cold surface. When multiple experiences with the same emotional charge accumulate, they merge, drawn together by an internal magnetic force, and form a knot of psychic energy. This knot is the seed of a complex. It is a cluster of memories, images, bodily sensations, and beliefs, all vibrating at the same emotional frequency. Think of it as a small solar system within your psyche, with a central memory, the sun, and other related experiences orbiting around it. This system is not just a passive memory, it is alive. It possesses a charge, a tension, and it constantly seeks to express and complete itself in the outer world. This is why Jung claimed that complexes behave like splinter personalities. They have a kind of rudimentary consciousness, a simple and powerful purpose, to repeat the original pattern. If a complex was formed around abandonment, it will unconsciously compel you to create or interpret situations of abandonment in your adult life, not out of malice, but because that is the only reality it knows. It is an echo of an old song, and its only function is to play that song repeatedly, in the hope that, one day, you will finally hear its melody and understand its origin. You don't just have one, you have dozens. Some are small and harmless, like little quirks or preferences. Others are gigantic and dominant, true titans that govern vast territories of your personality. We have complexes related to money, power, sexuality, spirituality, and the most powerful of all, those connected to our parental figures. The question is not whether you have complexes, but which of them are in command. Ignoring them is like living in a house without knowing there are other residents in the rooms. Residents who rearrange the furniture, hide your keys, and occasionally scream during the night. The first step towards psychological sovereignty is not to evict them, but to acknowledge their existence, listen to their noises, and, for the first time, knock on their doors to ask what they really want. Freedom comes not from the absence of complexes, but from the awareness of them. If the complex is the personal and unique sculpture that exists within you, the archetype is the universal marble from which all of humanity is carved. To understand this relationship, we need to dive into Jung's deepest idea, the collective unconscious. He posited that, beneath our personal unconscious, the repository of our forgotten memories and experiences, there exists a deeper layer, a psychic inheritance common to all of humanity. This collective ocean does not contain memories, but primordial forms or patterns of experience. These patterns are the archetypes. They are like the operating systems of the human soul, pre-installed at our birth. The archetype of the mother, the hero, the sage, the shadow, the anima, animus, these are energetic matrices that shape our perception and our behavior. They are like dry riverbeds, carved over millions of years of human experience. By itself, an archetype is neutral, distant, and numinous. It is just pure potential. The mother archetype, for example, contains the entire spectrum of motherhood, nurturing, care, creation, but also devouring, suffocating overprotection and destruction. Now, imagine your personal life as the rain, the drops of your individual experiences, the way your mother held you, the words she used, her presence or absence fall from the sky of your life. This rain fills the archetypal riverbed of the mother. It is in this moment that the miracle and the tragedy occur, the union of the universal with the particular. The archetype gains flesh and the complex is born. Your mother complex is the personal activation of the mother archetype, colored by the water of your experiences. This is why a complex has so much power. It is not just your memory, it is connected to an ancestral, collective source of energy. When your mother complex is activated, you are not just reacting to your mother, but to millennia of human experience with the maternal figure. This connection gives the complex a divine and possessive quality. It feels like a destiny, a force of nature. Understanding this is crucial. Fighting against a complex is futile, as it is like fighting against gravity or the tides. The task is not to fight, but to differentiate. To differentiate what in your experience is purely personal, the rain, and what is universal, the riverbed. By doing this, you begin to see the larger pattern, to remove the excessively personal charge, and to understand that you are participating in an eternal human drama. This does not diminish your pain, but it contextualizes it, giving it a deeper meaning and, paradoxically, offering a path to liberation. You realize that the goal is not to dry up the river, but to learn how to navigate its waters. The mother complex is, perhaps, the most fundamental and powerful of all, as it arises from our first and most symbiotic relationship. It is the primordial mold of how we relate to care, nourishment, security, intuition, and the world itself. Its influence is so pervasive that it colors the entirety of our emotional life, especially our intimate relationships. In its negative polarity, it can manifest into devastating ways. The first is that of the eternal son pour éternus, a man or woman who remains psychologically trapped in the mother's embrace. Even if the real mother is absent, the internalized complex prevents them from taking on responsibilities, committing to a partner or career, or facing the harshness of the world. They seek in their partners a new mother who will care for them, make the difficult decisions, and adore them unconditionally. When the partner demands mutuality and maturity, the complex feels betrayed and panics, often sabotaging the relationship to flee back to the fantasy of uterine security. The second manifestation is that of the rebel, one who, to escape the suffocating embrace of the mother or her devouring criticism, develops an armor of cynicism and pseudo-independence. They fear intimacy like the plague, seeing it as a trap that threatens their freedom. For a man, this can manifest in a Don Juan pattern, jumping from conquest to conquest without ever truly connecting, as emotional connection activates the dread of being swallowed. For a woman, it can manifest in a deep mistrust of other women and an excessive identification with the masculine, rejecting her own femininity and intuition because she associates them with the controlling maternal figure. In both cases, the person is not free. One is a prisoner of the desire for fusion, the other is a prisoner of the fear of fusion. The healing begins when one dares to look at the original wound. It requires mourning the perfect mother who never existed and accepting the human mother, with her flaws and limitations. It is a process of psychological weaning, where one learns to mother oneself, to provide one's own security, to nurture one's own dreams, to validate one's own feelings. It is the heroic act of leaving the infantile Garden of Eden and taking responsibility for one's own emotional life, transforming the search for an external mother into a connection with the internal Great Mother, the source of all creativity and resilience. If the mother complex shapes our inner and emotional world, the father complex sculpts our relationship with the external world, society, law, authority, ambition, and our ability to give structure and direction to our own lives. The figure of the father or his absence is our first encounter with the other, with the principle of order that defines and challenges the fusional paradise of the mother. The wound on this axis creates two equally paralyzing shadows, two sides of the same coin of inadequacy. The first shadow is that of the eternal approval seeker. This individual has internalized a critical, absent, or impossible to please father. As a result, their self-esteem is not an internal pillar, but a trembling reflection in the eyes of others. They live in a relentless pursuit of external validation. At work, they are the model employee who never says no, sacrificing their health and personal life in the hope of a pat on the back from the boss, who becomes the projection screen for the original father. In their relationships, they seek partners who admire them, but never feel truly worthy of the love they receive. Every achievement, every degree, every material possession acquired is a desperate attempt to fill a void that cannot be filled from the outside. They build a life that looks impressive to the world, but inside, they feel like a fraud, because the only voice that matters, that of the internalized father, remains silent, or whispers that they are still not good enough. The second shadow is that of the chronic rebel. For this person, the father figure was tyrannical, oppressive, or hypocritical. Their reaction is to declare war on any and all forms of authority. They pride themselves on being a free spirit, on not following the rules, on challenging the system. However, their freedom is an illusion. Every act of rebellion is, in fact, a reaction chain to the complex. They are not pro-autonomy, they are merely anti-authority. They define their identity by negation. Without an authority figure to oppose, they feel lost, without purpose. Their life becomes a series of battles against windmills, sabotaging jobs, relationships, and opportunities that require any level of conformity or commitment, because for their complex, commitment is synonymous with submission and annihilation, the journey of integrating the father. Complex requires one to build the inner father. This means learning to establish one's own laws, one's own values, one's own structure. For the approval seeker, it is the act of learning to validate oneself, to find one's worth in one's being, not in one's doing. For the rebel, it is the act of differentiating between tyrannical authority and healthy structure, of realizing that true freedom is not the absence of rules, but the ability to create and follow one's own. It is the process of becoming one's own authority, one's own king, governing the kingdom of one's life with wisdom, firmness, and compassion. In the depths of the psyche of many who consider themselves good and altruistic resides a dark and demanding figure, the hero. The hero complex is one of the noblest and therefore most dangerous traps of the soul. It is often born from a childhood where the child felt powerless, invisible, or responsible for the well-being of a dysfunctional adult. To survive, they learned that their value and safety depended on their ability to fix the chaos around them, to be strong, to save the day. The survival strategy crystallizes into a powerful complex in adult life. The person feels irresistibly drawn to broken situations and people. They become the problem solver at work, the supportive shoulder for everyone, and especially the savior in their romantic relationships, choosing partners with addictions, traumas, or chronic instability. To the outside world, they seem like a saint, a martyr. But inside, a dark dynamic is at play. The hero complex is not motivated by pure love, but by a compulsive need to validate one's own existence. Each person saved is a trophy that temporarily silences the cry of the powerless child, still living within them. They need to be needed to feel alive. The shadow of this complex is vast. First, it robs the other of their agency. By constantly saving, the hero prevents the other person from developing their own strength and resilience, creating a vicious cycle of dependency. Second, it is profoundly arrogant. The complex whispers, "I know what's best for you. Without me, you are lost." Third, and most tragic, it prevents true intimacy. The relationship is not between equals, but between savior and victim. The hero cannot show vulnerability, as that would threaten their entire identity. They do not know how to receive care, only how to give it. When the partner finally improves and no longer needs saving, the hero enters a crisis. Their purpose vanishes. Unconsciously, they might even sabotage the other's recovery to maintain their role. The cure for the hero complex is a journey of radical humility. It requires the person to take off their cape and face their own powerlessness, their own brokenness. The most heroic act they can perform is to learn to save themselves. This means setting boundaries, learning to say no, and allowing others to fight their own battles. It is a painful process of redefining one's worth, not based on what they do for others, but on who they simply are. True strength is not found in carrying the weight of the world on one's shoulders, but in having the courage to put it down and tend to one's own wound. We do not see the world as it is, we see it as we are. And the we that sees is, most of the time, a committee of complexes, each with its own agenda and its own lens through which to view reality. A complex is not just a memory or an emotion, it is an active perceptual filter. It functions like a pair of colored glasses that you don't even know you're wearing. If you have a strong inferiority complex, your glasses have a gray tint of inadequacy. You might receive 9 compliments and 1 subtle criticism, but your glasses will filter the compliments as insignificant or false, and will magnify the criticism, which will sound like thunder in your mind, confirming the central truth of the complex, I am not good enough. This is what makes complexes so insidious. They create a self-fulfilling prophecy. They don't just interpret reality in a biased way, they actively create it. The person with an abandonment complex, for example, will act in ways that unconsciously push their partners away. They might be overly needy, jealous, or constantly test the other's limits until the partner, exhausted, leaves. At that moment, the complex triumphs and says, "See, I knew it. Everyone always abandons me." The person believes they are a passive victim of fate, not realizing they were the director and lead actor in their own tragedy. These prisons are made of glass. They are transparent to those inside. The person believes they are seeing objective reality, that their reactions are justified by external events. They do not perceive the invisible bars of their own beliefs and emotional patterns. This is why willpower is so ineffective against them. Trying to change a behavior without understanding the complex behind it is like trying to fix the image from a projector by tinkering with the screen. The problem is in the lens, in the projector itself. Liberation begins with what the Greeks called metanoia, a fundamental shift in perception. It is the shocking moment when you realize you are wearing the glasses. You begin to question your automatic reactions. Is this anger really about what my boss said, or did he just activate my father complex? Is this fear of public speaking about the actual situation, or is it the echo of that time I was humiliated in school? This questioning creates a crack in the glass prison. It is the beginning of the separation between the observing eye and the reacting complex. Every time you manage to observe the complex in action without identifying with it, you weaken its power and strengthen your own consciousness. You don't break the prison all at once, but you create cracks in it until the light of objective reality can finally begin to shine through. A complex lives in the silence of the unconscious, but when activated, it is anything but subtle. It screams. Learning to recognize its voice amidst the chaos of an emotional crisis is the most crucial skill for self-knowledge. There are clear signs, signatures that betray its presence. The first and most obvious is the disproportionality of the emotion. You spill coffee on your shirt and feel a wave of homicidal rage or self-deprecating despair. That lasts for hours. The emotion is real, but its intensity is completely out of proportion to the trigger. This surplus energy does not belong to the present. It is the energy of the complex, the pain of the original wound that has been reactivated and now floods your consciousness. The second sign is autonomy and possession. You feel taken over by a feeling. There is a loss of control, a sense of being a passenger in your own body. You might hear yourself saying things you don't think, acting in ways that go against your values. Later, the emotional hangover sets in, along with the question, what got into me? The answer is, something got into you. A complex. The third sign is absolutist and repetitive language. When a complex is in command, thinking becomes rigid and binary. The phrases that echo in the mind are always the same, like a scratch record. I always mess everything up. No one will ever love me. he's doing this on purpose to hurt me. These thoughts are not rational analysis of the situation. They are the mantra of the complex. Its fundamental truth that it tries to impose on reality. The fourth sign is projection. The complex, being an unconscious part of us, has an irresistible tendency to manifest itself in the external world. We project the content of the complex onto other people. If you have an unresolved power complex, you will see tyrants and manipulators everywhere. If you repress your own dishonesty, your shadow, you will become obsessed with the dishonesty of others. The intensity of your reaction to a trait in another person is often a direct indicator that this trait is an unrecognized part of yourself, personified by a complex. Learning to identify these signs in real time is like developing an inner ear. Instead of being swept away by the emotional wave, you learn to say to yourself, "Ah, there it is again. That's my abandonment complex talking." This simple act of naming and recognizing creates a life-saving distance. It doesn't make the emotion disappear, but it prevents you from drowning in it. It transforms possession into observation, which is the first step toward conscious integration. Once you learn to identify the voice of a complex, the next step is not to silence it, but to invite it to a dialogue. Complexes are exiled parts of our psyche. They act destructively because they are desperate to be seen and heard. Healing comes through communication, not repression. Jung developed a powerful technique for this called active imagination. This is not passive daydreaming, but a conscious and deliberate engagement with the figures of the unconscious. In a state of relaxation, you can evoke the emotion or image associated with a complex. Give it a form, a voice, a figure. It might be a frightened child, an angry monster, a critical old man. Then you begin a dialogue. Ask it, "Who are you? What do you want from me? Why do you appear at these moments?" And then you listen. You allow the answers to emerge without censorship. The key is to treat the figure as a real and autonomous entity, with its own perspective. The goal is not to win an argument, but to understand. This technique builds a bridge between the conscious ego and the unconscious contents, allowing the energy trapped in the complex to begin to flow in a more constructive way. Another fundamental tool is dream analysis. Dreams are the theater of the unconscious, and complexes are the main actors in its nightly plays. Paying attention to recurring patterns, the figures that chase or help you, and the emotions that dreams evoke, offers a precise diagnosis of which complexes are most active in your life. A dream where you are constantly missing the train might point to a complex that makes you feel you are always behind in life. Dreaming of a dilapidated house could be the unconscious's way of showing that your psychic structure, your ego, needs attention. Working with dreams is like receiving daily letters from your deepest self. A therapeutic journal is a more accessible form of dialogue. Instead of just recording events, use the journal to converse with your emotions. When you feel overwhelming anxiety, write a letter to it. "Dear anxiety, I feel you in my chest today. What are you trying to tell me? What are you afraid of?" By personifying and addressing the emotion, you externalize it, preventing it from possessing you. You move the experience from "I am anxious" to "I am feeling the presence of anxiety." This subtle shift in language represents a quantum leap in consciousness. These techniques are not quick fixes. They are lifelong practices. They are the art of cultivating a relationship with your own inner world, transforming what was once a battlefield into a secret garden, full of mystery, danger, and unimaginable treasures. In the entire history of alchemy, the great goal was transmutatio, the transformation of lead prima materia into gold. In Jungian psychology, this metaphor is central. The complex, with its raw pain, its neurotic repetitiveness, and its dark energy, is our psychological lead, our raw material. The ego's natural tendency is to reject it, to hide it, to wish it would disappear. But the alchemist's secret is that gold is not created despite the lead, but from it. Psychic energy is like water. It cannot be destroyed, only dammed up or redirected. A complex is, in essence, a huge amount of vital energy, libido, that has been dammed up around a wound. This energy, when unconscious, manifests destructively, like a flood that destroys everything in its path. The work of integration does not aim to eliminate the dam, but to build conscious channels so that this energy can flow. and irrigate the dry lands of the psyche. How does this happen in practice? A person with a negative father complex, which made them feel constantly inadequate, may, after long work of becoming conscious, transform this quest for approval. The energy that was once spent trying to please authority figures can be redirected toward the pursuit of excellence in their own craft, not for others, but for themselves. The wound of inadequacy becomes the source of extraordinary discipline and dedication. The poison becomes the antidote. A hero complex, once confronted and understood, can have its energy transformed. The compulsive need to save others can be converted into genuine compassion and a refined skill for empowering people to save themselves. The energy that was used to create dependency is now used to foster autonomy. The hero becomes the mentor, the original wound that fuels the complex, the feeling of powerlessness, abandonment. Shame never completely disappears. It remains as a sensitive scar on the soul. However, it ceases to be a point of collapse and becomes a point of connection. It is precisely because you know the pain of that wound that you can develop a depth and an empathy that would be impossible otherwise. Your greatest wound becomes your greatest gift. It is the source of your wisdom, your creativity, your ability to connect with the humanity of others. The artist who creates moving works of beauty from their melancholy. The therapist who guides others through the labyrinth they have already traversed. The leader who governs with compassion, because they know inner tyranny. All are examples of this alchemy of the soul. The transformation is not a what-I'm event, but a continuous process of death and rebirth, where the lead of our suffering is slowly and patiently heated in the fire of consciousness, until one day it begins to glow. All the paths we have explored, recognizing the echoes, understanding the archetypes, dialoguing with the shadow, the alchemy of the wound, converge on a single destination, the great work of a human life, individuation. This is perhaps Jung's most important and most misunderstood concept. It is not about individualism, about becoming selfish or isolated. On the contrary, individuation is the process of becoming an individual, that is, undivided, whole. It is the journey to become who you truly are, in your unique and incomparable totality, beyond the social masks, the persona, and the expectations of others. In our youth, our task is to build a strong ego, to adapt to the external world, to succeed. But in the second half of life, a different call rises, a yearning of the soul for something more. The task now is to turn inward and confront everything that was left behind in the first half. The shadow, the complexes, the unlived parts of ourselves. Individuation is this process of conscious integration. Healing, in this context, does not mean the absence of problems or the elimination of complexes. An individuated person is not a perfect or enlightened person. They still have their complexes, their wounds, their darkness. The crucial difference is that they know they have them. They have developed a conscious relationship with their inner world. Their complexes no longer possess them unconsciously. Instead, they have learned to dialogue with them, to honor their messages, and to integrate their energy. The center of gravity of the personality shifts from the ego to what Jung called the self, the archetype of wholeness, the God within. The ego comes to serve the self, instead of believing it is the master of the house. The individuated person is one who can hold the tension of opposites within themselves, the masculine and the feminine, the conscious and the unconscious, good and evil, light and shadow. They no longer seek easy answers or superficial happiness, but rather a life of meaning. Even if it involves pain and paradox, they become the axis of their own wheel, able to experience the highs and lows of life without losing their center. This is the ultimate goal of the journey. It is not to reach a state of static perfection, but to engage in a dynamic and continuous process of becoming more and more oneself. It is the act of realizing the unique pattern that your soul came into this world to express. It is the answer to the most fundamental question a human being can ask: who am I? Beyond everything I was told I should be, the integration of complexes is, therefore, not just a therapeutic technique. It is a spiritual path, a hero's journey to the center of one's own being, where, in confronting one's demons, one finally finds one's treasure, oneself.